Welcome to the Online Great Books podcast, brought to you by OnlineGreatBooks.com, where we talk about the good life, the great books, great conversation, and great ideas.
Hello, dear listeners. Welcome back to the Online Great Books podcast. I'm Brett, the producer, who just finished listening to this conversation that you're about to hear. Scott and Karl are about to dive into a little offering from the Chinese military, written in the late 90s, or at least a couple personnel from the Chinese military. It is called Unrestricted Warfare, and this show is just as fun and light and hopeful as the title advertises. It is split into two parts. The conversation is dense. Today's show a little bit shorter than the one that will follow next week. So take the time in between the two to go familiarize yourself with Unrestricted Warfare. It's relevant. Thanks for taking the time to listen to the Online Great Books podcast. Enjoy the conversation.
I'm Scott Hambrick.
I'm Karl Schut.
And today on the Online Great Books podcast, we're going to talk about Unrestricted Warfare by two Chinese military officers whose names I have no hope of getting correct.
They're all Jack.
Yeah.
So I have a Chinese client at Barbell Logic online coaching, where you can find me, by the way, and also Scott, but you should hire me.
Yeah.
He just says his name's Jack, but it's not Jack.
Right.
So we should name them Jack and Bob, maybe?
Diane. Yeah, that's fine. Yeah, they've got Q's and X's in their names, and I can do okay until they do that. And I'm not making fun of them. I'm just telling you.
No, the rules for pronouncing the English alphabet transliterations of Chinese names are obscure to me. I don't know how to do it.
The first gentleman, his last name is Liang, Liang, and the last one is Xiangsui.
Xiangsui? I don't know.
They wrote this book in 1999. They were at that time colonels in the Chinese military. I don't know if it's Air Force or Army but Unrestricted Warfare. But before you do that, we were talking about razors, Karl.
Yeah, I treated myself to a new one.
Treat yourself.
I had an old Merkur, which is all right. It's fine. One of my children expressed interest in a safety razor, so I thought I would treat myself. So I got a Henson, which is from Canada, and I kind of like it so far. It's got a real sharp, I sent you pictures in the
Beautiful
chat, a real sharp bend, not much blade poking out. I've done my head with it twice. I did my face without even lathering up. You can go against the grain and no problems. I'm pretty pleased with it. So when you have a safety razor, you're taking the double-edged razor and you're putting it in, and when you screw it in, what it does is it bends the blade so that it has an angle that you use against your face. And so any variation on safety razors is going to be how they manage that.
And how much the blade protrudes and what the angle of attack is. Yeah, and those double-edged blades, and that's what I use too, Karl. What are they, 3 cents a piece?
Mm-hmm.
I haven't even looked in a long time, but I was using the Gillette sensor or whatever. They're probably, I don't even know, here in 2021 with a 3,500% inflation, they're probably $60 for one.
Per.
Yeah, for one.
And 5 blades.
Yeah.
You don't need 5 blades. Get yourself a safety razor. Be environmentally conscious. Conscious.
I use a
Get one.
Gillette ball end. My dad was issued a Gillette safety razor when he entered the Army, and he gave that razor to me. I thought, I'll use it. I used it. I thought, this is pretty good. And I bought myself another one, and I bought a whole bunch of them and gave them out for Christmas. So that's what I've been using.
So this is on eBay. I remember you talking about that, and what was unique about it was, again, that whatever it does with the angle of the blade.
Yeah.
There's a whole world out there, gentlemen and ladies. Ladies can use them too.
Yeah.
For whatever they need to do.
And my wife does.
You can find them in pink if you really must.
Blech.
No, it's one of the regrets of my life is that I did not grab my grandfather's safety razor when we were breaking up his house after he died. I did get all of his history books, so I have those behind me somewhere. Yeah.
Hey, Karl, we got an email from a lady named Lara. Is that Laura? Lara?
Sure.
Laura? She says, I'm ready to give you encouragement and tell you how you've changed a little part of my world. I started listening to your OGB podcast a year ago and loved it. I was so inspired by the great conversation and great ideas. It gave me the courage to be a better reader. I hadn't read many books except the few we had to read at school. It just didn't come easily. But I always wanted to be a better reader. In the same way, I also wanted to be a morning person, although I think that'll be more difficult. She said, anyway, if I was going to have to read, I was going to make my friends do it too. Since being in Australia, I couldn't easily join your online course. I convinced them all to join my Great Books book club. For the past 9 months, approximately 15 of us between 22 and 30 have met every 3 weeks to consume wine and cheese and read the Western canon. So far, we've read Plato's Republic, St. Thomas More's Utopia, the Iliad, the Odyssey, and Dostoevsky's Crime and Punishment. That's a heavy lift.
That is.
She says, I have read more in the past 6 months than I have in the past 6 years, and it's changed my life. I'd like to personally thank you both for starting your initiative, without which I would never have started mine. Well, there you go. That's why we're doing it. Way to go.
Well, you're welcome.
Good job, sis.
That Utopia is a fun book.
Yeah. Yeah, we should do that one, too. We should get that one done. Infinity Pile.
Yeah. Keeps getting taller.
Oh, why did we read this thing?
Why did we read this thing? Because you suggested it.
Was I wrong?
No, it's not a great book, but although it's the Online Great Books podcast, we don't just read the great books. Mostly we leave those for, when you join us. These are the pretty good books, or the interesting books, or the books we have to read for something else, and we're going to double bag it and save some reading time. I thought it was very interesting to hear, I suppose, an enemy's view of the United States and our conduct in wars, at least up to 1999. I thought it was extremely scary. It's stuff that's completely obvious, but that I didn't think of until I read it.
Yeah, you're right. It is not a great book. I'm not talking, when I say great, I don't mean like Western canon. It's, I don't know. Hell, maybe it is, Karl. We're reading an English translation. Maybe it's better than this. It's 196 pages long, and it was not just jam-packed with shocking revelations. But it's super interesting, and it is super scary as well. Unrestricted Warfare. What is the thesis of this thing? What is he saying?
I think it's on page XXI. Well, that's one place you can find it. We used to think of in terms of a battlefield. As we were out driving, we drove past some Civil War battlefield on our way home. And a battlefield would be a well-defined area where the battle took place, where the soldiers went to kill each other and decide whose politics were going to rule when they were done. And they're all over the country, at least the eastern half of the country. You can find them, and they're well-defined areas. Well, we don't use cannons anymore. We don't use artillery anymore very much. We don't really kill each other very much anymore, which is probably a good thing. But we certainly do wage war. And the war that is waged is, there's no battlefield boundary. Let's see. So this is a XXI. When people begin to lean toward and rejoice in the reduced use of military force to resolve conflicts, which is probably a good thing, war will be reborn in another form and in another arena, becoming an instrument of enormous power in the hands of all those who harbor intentions of controlling other countries or regions. And then they give some examples. In this sense, there's reason for us to maintain that the financial attack by George Soros on East Asia, the terrorist attack on the U.S. Embassy by Osama bin Laden, the gas attack on the Tokyo subway by the disciples of the Aum Shinri Qiao, the havoc wreaked by the likes of Morris Jr. on the internet, I don't know who Morris Jr. is, in which the degree of destruction is by no means second to that of a war, represent semi-warfare, quasi-warfare, and sub-warfare. That is the embryonic form of another kind of warfare. Okay, so let's unpack that a little bit. We don't kill each other very much anymore. But we sure do try to impose our will on others. Which is, I think, the way they would define war.
Yeah.
Getting other people to do what you want them to do. And that hasn't stopped. And it's not done with rifles very much, but it's done with financial attacks, with terrorist attacks, with internet things, like shutting down a pipeline. Whoever did that.
He says that the authors, say that warfare has become unrestricted in part because there is I can't remember what the exact phrase they used was, but there is an excess of force available. Prior to the invention of atomic weapons, the war wager's problem was always bringing enough force to bear at a certain point. Like all strategy and tactics was about which point to bring it to and how much could I muster for that point. And that's not a problem now because there are enough weapons to destroy the entire Earth, 100 times. So because of mutually assured destruction, old-style warfare, and by the way, atomic warfare is from 1945. I mean, old-style warfare is off the table. Seems to be.
I hope.
It has been since 45 up till July 2nd, 2021. But because of the interconnectedness of the world, this unrestricted type of warfare that does not have a discrete battlefield can be brought to bear. Should it be? Let's assume that there will be conflict. Is this kind of warfare okay? Is it good? Is it better than Achilles type?
Yeah, I was thinking about that. And of course, you could probably predict what my example is going to be. In 1453, Constantinople fell to the Turks, finally. The little rump bit of the Roman Empire finally went under. Anatolia, which is modern-day Turkey, and that bit across the way into Europe and Constantinople was the heart of Christianity. It wasn't Rome. Rome was a backwater. At least for the first 1,000 years, Rome was a backwater. There were wolves running through the streets in Benedict's time. So, a huge Christian population. There aren't any there anymore. It's 2,000 maybe in the city. Maybe I don't know how many are in Turkey. It's very small. The Ecumenical Patriarch has a small parish. That's it. How did they do it? They didn't kill them. They didn't do Diocletian. They didn't do huge persecutions and ethnic cleansing. What they did was a long strategy that reminded me of this book, talking about financial instruments and to destroy economies and PR attempts. It wasn't illegal to be a Christian. It just cost you more money. You had to pay a higher tax. Occasionally they would do violence against the Christians in the town, go in and slaughter people in the church, but it'd be small. But mostly it's just, you want to be a Christian, you have to live a second-class citizen. You can't, take you're going to pay the higher tax rate. What they did is they did financial warfare. They would depose the patriarch, and they get another one of the rich Greeks, because the Greeks had the money, to buy his way in to be patriarch. The Turks would raise money that way, and then they would depose another one and do it. So it's a whole bunch of strategies, which are not war, but aren't they? And you have the current state where there's hardly a Christian in Constantinople.
Is that more just than just killing them all?
Well, if they kill you, they give you the opportunity to be martyrs and develop a resistance and fight back and say, those dirty bastards, we're going to get them. Well, if you're using the new form of warfare, there's no dirty bastards to get.
Right.
I mean, there's pluses and minuses. On the one hand, there's not blood in the streets, not much.
So the actions need to be congruent with the aims. In the Carlingian world, like if the aim is destruction, you want there to actually be destruction.
Well, okay, let me give a different example. All you nerds out there, Star Wars. The Empire blows up planets with the Death Star, which is a great name. And they have the Rebel Alliance pop up in resistance. What if the Empire just did it all with tax rates and informers and, I don't know, targeted disease vectors?
So what you're saying... No.
There wouldn't have been a Rebel Alliance. It still would have been war, but nobody would have known it.
This makes the asymmetries in war maybe worse. Both better and worse. If you're a Bronze Age man from Afghanistan and there are Apache helicopters around, you can still do some guerrilla warfare and maybe win, apparently. Maybe. Huh?
Yeah.
Yeah, but what if Soros isn't even on your continent and destroys your currency? It makes the asymmetries of war much worse. In some instances, it's better. Some clever 15-year-old hackers could bring about political change, potentially. With a Chromebook, maybe. So in some ways, it's a little more democratic, but I think all in all, it is... it takes power from smaller people and smaller groups and aggregates them to people that already have a lot of power. Like, I can't manipulate the currency like Soros can, because God knows if I could, it would have happened.
Okay, so your Bronze Age guy in Afghanistan, does he even care about the currency?
Well, maybe not. So maybe that analogy doesn't hold.
No, I think it does, but the reason I bring that up is the reason why, I don't know, troublesome people in Montana or something are more vulnerable than troublesome people in Afghanistan is because in Montana they use dollars. And they're on the internet, and they're connected to the power grid, and they consume media. So the degrees to which you are connected to everything else is the degrees to which you're on that new battlefield.
Because the battlefield is unrestricted. That's the name of the book.
Yeah, Jim in Afghanistan, that's my name for him.
Jim Laden.
He doesn't care. His world is small. It's like the 20 miles around him. I don't know how far they travel customarily, but that's the limits of their world. You don't care. And you can shoot down a few helicopters and make it too much trouble for anybody to bother you. They might just go away and not bother you. But if you're part of the connected world, they're going to bother you.
First part of the book is a little bit tedious. Well, wait a minute. All the parts of the book are a little bit tedious. But the first part of the book is more tedious, sir. The authors try to talk about some of these old military axioms on page 10. Fighting the fight that fits one's weapons and making the weapons to fit the fight. Longbowsmen in the 100 Years' War, needed to fight a particular fight in order to win because they had the longbow and their opponent didn't. The men in the phalanx needed to fight a particular kind of fight in order to win, to take advantage of their weapons. And these authors here say that in the past, weapons were defined by their mobility and lethal power. And that wealthy countries, particularly the United States, continue to have this desire, here it says on 14, of using the magic of high technology to work some alchemy on traditional weapons so that they are completely remade, and they have ultimately fallen into the high-tech trap involving the endless waste of limited funds in an arms race. The ultimate result is that the weapons to defend the country actually become a cause of national bankruptcy. So, here at the beginning of this book, they're saying, we've gone from this idea that the English longbowman had, that he wanted to fight a particular kind of fight because of the weapons he had, to trying to figure out where the arena of war will be, maybe the mountains of Afghanistan, and then inventing weapons to fit the arena. And he says, by trying to do that, the authors say that by trying to do that, you're going to bankrupt yourself. In subsequent chapters, they say that none of these weapons that are new and that are being thought about and talked about in these wealthy country circles are actually new. Like a cruise missile might have GPS guidance and all kinds of technology, but it's still a bomb. You might be able to put it in an air intake in somebody's building, but it's still a bomb. Apache helicopter might be able to hover and fly backwards, but it's still actually a tank. It's not this, he's like, there isn't a revolution as long as you're still trying to use mobility and lethal power.
Well, especially when the war has moved away just from lethal power.
Right. Yeah. And so if mobility and lethal power is the weapon you have and you keep trying to make that work, it's not going to work.
So if you have, let's see, I'm going to go back to page 13. The most modern military force does not have the ability to control public clamor and cannot deal with an opponent who does things in an unconventional manner. So, public clamor, we might speak slightly politically today. By which I mean we might talk about current events. Okay. So a stunning victory, I guess, in First Gulf War, in the liberation of Kuwait. Okay, in 92?
Oh, 92. I'm sorry. Yeah.
No, it was earlier than that. It was when I was in college.
91, 92.
Yeah. Stunning victory. Very few casualties on the U.S. side. Lots on the other side. Complete destruction of their armed forces. They just quit. Okay, great. But I guess great. Subsequent wars. We have been in Afghanistan for 20 years, 21 years, and we're leaving. Not having won. Okay? I wouldn't call it a victory. I would call it a huge loss. With lots of time and lives lost, because the war wasn't about the projection of deadly force. It was about waiting you out. It was about winning the PR battle. Doing what you can to make Americans pack up their stuff and go home. Everybody knows that's how you beat America. Not with bombs, because you don't have any, and they have lots. You do it by dragging a corpse through Mogadishu.
Yep.
And getting it into American television, especially if the president at the time is of the opposite party of the dominant media. They're going to play the story over and over and over again, and Americans will say, "What are we doing there? That's terrible," and quit. So they're already doing it to us.
On page 15, he says the B-2, which runs $13 to $15 billion each, is some 3 times more expensive than an equivalent weight of gold. And then he talks about some other weapons, and he says, if this is still true for the rich and brash United States, how far can other countries who are short of money continue down this path? Then down at the bottom of the page, proposing a new concept of weapons does not require relying on the springboard of new technology. It just demands lucid and incisive thinking. However, this is not a strong point of the Americans who are slaves to technology in their thinking. So he says, hey, if you're going to win against these guys, you're going to have to come up with weapons that cost more than 3 times their weight in gold. You can't afford to do it, so you're going to have to get inventive. Use a slingshot, knock one soldier out, drag him around in Mogadishu, whatever you can do and get it on TV. Like, it's unrestricted warfare.
Hey, you got to play your class. If you're in Dungeons and Dragons and you're a fighter, you do fighter stuff. I love playing fighters. You bash the door down and you go in with your sword and your shield and you beat things up. If you're a rogue, you don't do that. You come at it sideways. If you're a magician, a wizard, sorcerer, whatever. Yeah. I don't know the new rules. You got to make space for you to do what you have to do. It only makes sense that the people are going to do this. Nobody's going to fight us on our terms, but they keep beating us.
Because our terms is the old technology. This is the Polish doing cavalry charges at the beginning of World War I. World War II. Yeah.
World War II.
You can't. It's all they had. Well,
it's all they had.
Yep.
They were valiant heroes of the Polish nation, but not going to do very well against panzers.
So your B-2 is the height of technology, of military technology, mobility, and force production, but that doesn't matter because that's not what the battle is anymore. Page 16, I think this is super important. The new concept of weapons is a view of weapons in the broad sense. Blah, 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 blah. Everything that can benefit mankind can also harm him. This is to say there is nothing in the world today that cannot become a weapon. Blah, blah, blah. With technological developments being in the process of striving to increase the type of weapons, a breakthrough in our thinking can open up the domain of the weapons kingdom at one stroke. As we see it, a single man-made stock market crash, a single computer virus invasion, or a single rumor or scandal that results in a fluctuation in the enemy country's exchange rates or exposes the leaders of an enemy country to the internet, all can be included in the ranks of new concept weapons. A new concept of weapons provides direction for new concept weapons, while the new concept weapons give fixed forms to the new concept of weapons. The appearance of new concept weapons will definitely elevate future warfare to a level which is hard for the common people or even military men to imagine. The second thing we have to say should be the new concept of weapons will cause ordinary people and military men alike to be greatly astonished at the fact that commonplace things that are close to them can also become weapons with which to engage war. Right, bro.
Yeah. So I just looked up something if you heard the clicking of my keyboard. And look, I'm not even mad, okay? If I could do it, I suppose I would do it. So if I typed in to DuckDuckGo, can you use TikTok in China?
Nope.
No. Even though TikTok is a 100% Chinese app, it is blocked in China. Well, that's interesting, isn't it? So you can have the cell phone. You can have the cell phone perhaps be a weapon to get people to do whatever it is they do on TikTok, apparently do lewd and suggestive dancing. I don't know. I'm not on TikTok.
Yeah.
I don't know. Is it a weapon? It's a pretty clever one.
We might say that it's a weapon of culture. Maybe. I don't know. But what about this? What if you work at the Pentagon and your 14-year-old daughter has a TikTok account that has access to the camera and the microphone on her phone? And that's at your house.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so mine is just the surface level of having an app that encourages young people, especially women, to do the sorts of things they do. But, you could also, you've got software installed on 80% of the cell phones in the United States.
And by the way, I said an officer at the Pentagon's daughter, according to these guys, I'll read their mind for them a little bit, that guy's actually not that important anymore. It's like the middle engineer, software engineer at the XYZ power company. That guy might be more militarily important at this point than Colonel Toughnuts.
Yeah, but they do. So we're hanging around in this first chapter. It is kinder weapons, but on the other hand, well, they say on page 18, at the same time, technological process has given us the means to strike at the enemy's nerve center directly without harming other things, giving us numerous new options for achieving victory. And all these make people believe that the best way to achieve victory is to control, not to kill. At the end of that paragraph, warfare has now taken leave of the meat grinder age of Verdun-like campaigns. On the next page, however, a kinder weapon is still a weapon. So the morality of this, the morality of war is tricky anyway. The only people who care about it are, honestly, Catholic theologians, I think. Augustine came up with the proportionate war, just war stuff. In that hall of academia, it's a concern. I don't think anybody else cares. It's a fact. It's going to happen. How can we be effective?
Yeah, and people will talk about the morality of war, but like McIntyre says, they really don't have the vocabulary to talk about it. So I can imagine. One of my good friends went to West Point, and I imagine that they had conversations about this, but they wouldn't have been trapped in the same sort of talk that. Well, maybe I would talk about it under.
Yeah, but if we did do a just war analysis on this, the means are, I forget the rules, but the end has to be good, the means have to be proportionate, and pretty much you can't just target civilians. That's the one where it falls short for me. But if I can compel your country to accede to my demands, whatever the demands, presuming it's China, whatever their demands are, what they want to do is control the United States or make it not be a competitor or get it to do what they want somehow. Okay? If that can be done through TikTok, relatively painlessly, even giving enjoyment to the people who use it, shouldn't they? Rather than coming down through Canada and wiping, coming across the plains of North Dakota.
The Libertarian would say, well, they don't have to install TikTok. It's cool, man. Okay. Here's Aquinas' rules. A war is just if it is called by a sovereign authority, has a just cause, the combatants have morally right intentions, and it cannot intend intrinsically evil actions, and the proportionality has to outweigh the evil of the war.
Yeah, so the intrinsically evil actions are where I think that falls. That if this is in fact a strategy, that's where this would fall short, because you're getting people to make soft porn on their phones. But, you win and they don't die. I guess that's better, right?
Make no mistake, these Chinese are not Thomists. They don't come from that tradition. These are not,
right.
This is not their kind of idea.
Well, and it's not, besides, the book is interesting. It's not just, I'm bringing up China as an example because it's a Chinese book, but, anybody who attempts to compel the United States or anybody else in the world to do what they want are using these techniques.
Yeah, that's one of the things they say in here, is that this won't necessarily be sovereigns that do it. It could be any group that could do this now. It could be Soros. It could be some hackers. Who knows? Who knows? Oh my gosh, It's spooky.
Page 20, the essence of war is one of compulsion. It may alter the cruel process of war, but there's no way to change the essence of war, which is one of compulsion, and therefore it cannot alter its cruel outcome either. It's still war, in other words, even if nobody gets killed.
But is it?
I don't know. I'm not. It's something. We usually think of war as being violent, physically violent.
I get really tired of this sort of war, inflation, deflation, conflation, the war on poverty, the war on drugs, the war, like everything's a war, a culture war. So I don't know what to call it. Yeah, I don't, war on inflation. I don't know what to call it. But there is a compulsion at the root of it. Is it war? I don't know. So if it's not war, do Thomas's rules or Karl's rules, do they really apply?
Well, you still wouldn't want to do intrinsically evil stuff.
What does the libertarians say about
it? You always got to beat on the libertarians. How many libertarians are there? But not very many. I mean, they don't have any power, and when they get it, if they got it, they don't exercise it. Except, Free State Project, our friend Brett, and all that's an attempt to actually exercise power. But
both the American left and the right hold libertarian ideals, right? The left is like, let's legalize this, let's legalize that, marry a dog, whatever they want to do, whatever it is, right? And then the right is like, Twitter's not a public property. They can do whatever they want to you there. They don't have free speech. It's the quote unquote free market. Like, those libertarian ideas suffuse both sides of the one political spectrum that we have to look at here.
Well, and it presumes that the people that are running these corporations that you're free to deal with or not are being above board.
I don't think it presumes anything like that. It's like, well, it's the free market.
Yeah, but it's not the free market. Is it the free market if I am lying to you about the product?
Buyer beware, caveat emptor. No, I mean, really, that's what they do, Karl. Then the left would say, hey, listen, if those girls want to do a wet T-shirt contest on TikTok, whatever, man. Like, fray the nipple. Like nobody in the United States has an answer to this stuff.
Yeah, so one of the reactions you get to the book, or at least that I got to the book, is I wish, I'm going to get in trouble for this. It's the same answer I had to Saul Alinsky, or the same response I had to Saul Alinsky, which is, I wish my people would do this. I wish they would realize they're in a war, and I wish they would realize that these are not neutral actors out there. That the free app that you install on your phone, you're the product, or you're the experiment. You're the thing that's being manipulated, and if the essence of war is compulsion, then you are becoming a victim in that war, and you might not even know it.
Page 30. While no military thinker has yet put forth an extremely wide-ranging concept of the battlefield, technology is doing its utmost to extend the contemporary battlefield to a degree that is virtually infinite. There are satellites in space, there are submarines under the water, there are ballistic missiles that can reach anywhere on the globe, and electronic countermeasures are even now being carried out in the invisible electromagnetic spectrum of space. Even the last refuge of the human race, the inner world of the heart, cannot avoid the attacks of psychological warfare. There are nets above and snares below, so the person has no place to flee. Yahtzee.
Yeah. Yeah, so think about this is, if you want to beat on libertarians, let's beat on libertarians. It has to do with the notion of liberty. I'm free to choose whatever I want. Well, how free am I? I used to do this example in class back when I had classes in classrooms. You can wear any clothing you want to class. A huge variety of clothing is legal. You need to wear some.
Right.
And nobody came to class in a kilt. And I would say, so you're all free. And when I first started teaching, it was all blue jeans. And when I left, it was all pajama bottoms. Right. But they all chose the same thing. Freely. The freely was in scare quotes. How free are your attitudes and thoughts? How much armor do you have against those who try to compel you? I don't know how free you are. You know, we think the things that everyone tells us to think.
Especially when the grams are all, pushing your dopamine buttons and so on. Your inner world is not what it was.
Yeah.
I wrote here on page 33, Karl. The authors know a lot about the American military.
Yes. Heck, they probably been here.
We had a listener, by the way, Karl. I didn't send this to you, and he'll be irritated that I didn't, but, we got enough to do. He sent us this book. It's a PDF called Information Warfare, Forging Communication Strategies for 21st Century Operational Environments by James P. Farwell, published by the Marine Corps University Press, Quantico, Virginia, 2020. Yeah, and it's on information warfare. And they mention, and this book here mentions unrestricted warfare. Like I said, I wrote here that these people know a lot about the United States military. The United States military is trying, I'm sure, but the problem is the United States military is a more of a known quantity than any of its opponents are. You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
Like the United States military, like these authors in 1999 knew a lot about the United States military, its culture, its ways, its ways of thinking, its history. How much can you know about an Afghani goat herd? The military intelligence people would say, well, a lot. Well, he's probably more unpredictable than a guy flying an F-16. He has more possibilities for action than the F-16 pilot does.
But much less power for actual destruction. But if your point is to compel him somehow, there's less wrenches you can pull on to compel him.
Nothing left to lose.
Fewer wrenches.
He's got nothing. You can't do nothing to that guy.
Yeah.
Yeah, so the U.S. military, the whole time I was reading this, I was like, man, we're at a huge disadvantage, despite what everybody thinks with stealth this and, technology that.
They got a list of kinds of war that are, this is 38 and following, which are non-military war operations. Trade war, financial war, new terror war, which I guess is a bit of a more targeted terror campaign. Ecological war. You could mess up people's rivers. Psychological war. There's got a bunch in that next paragraph on 42, which I think are huge. Spreading rumors to intimidate the enemy, break down his will. Smuggling warfare. Media warfare. Manipulating what people see and hear in order to lead public opinion along. See if any of these ring a bell with you. Drug warfare. Obtaining sudden and huge illicit profits by spreading disaster in other countries. Network warfare, technological warfare, fabrication warfare, resource warfare, grabbing riches by plundering stores of resources. Like, I don't know, finding all the cobalt mines.
Or buying up all the farmland.
And buying them up.
It's free market, bro.
Economic aid warfare, cultural warfare, leading cultural trends along in order to assimilate those with different views. TikTok. international law warfare, seizing the earliest opportunity to set up regulations. That's a kind of warfare. And I know you get your point. This is the expansion of the word war. They're not killing you doing this stuff, but they are compelling you. And there's a lot of people trying to do this sort of thing. Like the resource warfare. You like your electric car, dear listener. Where'd the battery come from?
Sunshine.
Who has a monopoly on the sources for those batteries?
Yep.
You can look that up. So if you want to compel behavior, you grab everything you can to control behavior. That culture warfare. Nobody wants to talk about the culture war, but there are many ways to try to get you to believe the way other people want you to believe. And it's not even the way that they believe. It's the way that they want you to believe that's useful to them.
I'm going to go back to 35 just because I like the money payoff on the end of this, Karl. During the 1990s, and concurrent with the series of military actions launched by non-professional warriors and non-state organizations, we began to get an inkling of a non-military type of war which is prosecuted by yet another type of non-professional warrior. This person is not a hacker in the general sense of the term and is also not a member of a quasi-military organization. Perhaps he or she is a system analyst or a software engineer or a financier with a large amount of mobile capital or a stock speculator. He or she might even perhaps be a media mogul who controls a wide variety of media, a columnist or the host of a TV program. His or her philosophy of life is different from that of a certain blind and inhuman terrorist. Frequently, he or she has a firmly held philosophy of life, and his or her faith is by no means inferior to Osama bin Laden's in terms of its fanaticism. Moreover, he or she does not lack the motivation or courage to enter the fight as necessary. Judging by this kind of standard, who can say that George Soros is not a financial terrorist?
Yeah, this is 1999. This isn't wingnut American right-wing media.
Well, he caused the Asian financial crisis. He caused it. And they hate him for it, and they're right to. But beyond the payoff there where he pokes Soros, and I love that, it says his or her philosophy of life is different from that of certain blind and inhuman terrorists. So this person has a philosophy of life that's different than some crazy jihadi, maybe. Frequently, he or she has a firmly held philosophy of life, and his or her faith is by no means inferior to Osama bin Laden's in terms of its fanaticism. So there are extremists out there who have tools at their hands.
Mm-hmm.
They might not be hackers. They could be systems analysts, software engineers, financiers, media moguls. Right.
Sometimes they're billionaires.
Right. From now on, soldiers no longer have a monopoly on war. Let's see.
Yeah. Bottom of 43. The goal of this kind of warfare, this new kind of warfare, will encompass more than merely using means that involve the force of arms to force the enemy to accept one's own will. I guess it's the old-fashioned definition of war right there. Rather, the goal should be to use all means whatsoever, means that involve the force of arms, and means that do not involve the force of arms, means that involve military power, and means that do not involve military power, means that entail casualties, and means that do not entail casualties, to force the enemy to serve one's own interests. Yeah, and we know it's happening, and I'm not saying, I'm going to bring up examples, and like I said, I'm not even mad.
Why get mad?
Because, if they beat you, they beat you. A sitting congressman on the Intelligence Committee had a physical relationship with a Chinese spy. An ongoing physical relationship with a Chinese spy. He is still on the Intelligence Committee. This is the one that we know about.
Yep.
So, of course they're doing it. I feel like Patton in that movie.
Right.
Talking about Rommel. I read your book. Of course they're doing it. Why wouldn't they? So one of the benefits of reading a book like this is just being aware that people are making war against you. That you might be able to defend yourself a little bit.
Really? We'll get back to that.
Well, you certainly can't if you don't know that they're doing it. If you know somebody's poisoning you, you might be able to figure it out and not take the poison.
But what if it's everything?
But if you don't know, just make your own internet, make your own house, make your own world.
Page 50.
Right?
Following the Cold War, the period in which alliances were formed on the basis of ideology faded away, while the approach in which alliances are built on interest rose to primacy. Under the general banner of realpolitik, in which national interests are paramount, any alliance can only be focused more nakedly on interests, and at times they don't even feel like raising the banner of morality. This really upset me. I know this is true. This stupid Kissinger. He's going to die, by the way. Well, you can't kill him. He's not human.
Eventually.
Realpolitik, which national interests are paramount. Now, it's actually not national. Hambrick has a very circumscribed definition for nation. This is government interests. Now, I think for the Chinese, government and nation probably map onto each other pretty well. Country and nation. But they don't here, and they don't in lots of places. Am I peeing on the third rail? Nation for Hambrick doesn't necessarily mean government. Now, so we've got a problem with translation here where they say, under the general banner of realpolitik in which national interests are paramount. I don't think they actually mean what Hambrick means when he says national. I think he means government interests. So I wrote down here in the bottom, what interest and whose interest?
Sure, yeah.
So my redneck is over here sitting in a barn in Rogers County, Oklahoma, and I don't really care about the Nord Stream or whatever they call it pipeline, or the Black Sea, or Verdun.
But somebody does.
No, do they? Like, no shit, do they? Or is it just governments that care?
Well, the somebody I was referring to is...
Yeah, but I'm not talking about those. I'm talking about, like, some dude over there and some dude over here. Like, does anybody actually, do like real people, are they actually that concerned about the Black Sea or Nord Stream? No.
No, not real people, right. Only the unreal people, only the lizard people. Right. I was listening to a podcast, had a guy on talking about inflation and as the act of the ruling class against the people, because you can steal their money. And you, being rich, can move your money. So adopting inflationary policies is in somebody's interests. Not mine. The thing that bugged me about that line was the idea that before the Cold War ended...
Yeah, I don't think that's right.
It was based on ideology. I'm not so sure it is. I've read enough about Churchill that I think it probably wasn't.
But in the, let's call it the Kissinger era. So you've got, these governments jockeying to secure their interests. Okay, that's one thing. And I don't really like that a whole lot. But if what they say is true, and systems analysts, financiers, media moguls, so on, have the ability to pursue their interests as paramount, it's really unrestricted warfare. I don't know how many there are that are recognized in the world. What does the UN recognize? I don't know. Let's say 140. I don't know.
There used to be a song on Animaniacs.
Have to change that song every 2 weeks, probably.
Where he's saying every country in the world.
Well, you don't have to worry about 140 of those now. Like, it's everyone.
Yeah. And if this book is right about this, which I think it's clear that it's right, you can see that it makes sense for the current segregation and balkanization into people groups, I think Trent said earlier, into interest groups. Because it's war of all against all, if that's the case. And you need to have some all with you in order to have your interests, in order not to be compelled so hard. So people that organize and march and burn stuff down, their interests get recognized.
No, it's just what it is.
It makes sense. Not even mad.